If you are on an extreme budget, but you want to get some of the best value for money when it comes to PC gaming, then today's video may be of a little bit of interest to you, where we picked up recently on a used PC parts hunt a laptop for $110. Now, this laptop has a broken screen. The screen, even though it still does give out a picture, it's got blown LEDs on the right-hand side. It's also got blown LEDs on the left-hand side, and the whole frame that it's attached to is also broken as well. So in order for me to fix this properly, I would have to replace the screen, I'd have to replace the frame, and that can cost a lot of extra money, especially when those replacement parts are expensive. Then you've got to factor in the time involved in fixing a laptop like this, when all the parts, at least in the base of the laptop, that is the CPU, the graphics card, the hard drive, the RAM, the motherboard, they all still work perfectly fine. And so this got me thinking, if we used a broken laptop, an external monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, and we put that all together to make a laptop gaming PC setup, what kind of price performance could we get for under $150? And if this does indeed work out, then it could be a great option for PC gamers going forward. So let's take a look at what we've got and hook everything up.
Are you tired of seeing this annoying activate Windows message? Then if so, today's video sponsor SCD Keys has you covered. For as little as $14 using the coupon code BFTYC, you can get activated today. Works for Windows 11 Pro too. Links in the description below.
So the laptop in question is right here. We've got a panel that is basically just hanging off only the left-hand side hinge, and the right-hand side hinge is just broken, the frame's broken, and also we can see here that LED is blown out in the bottom right-hand corner. It also looks like there's been just a couple of LEDs in the bottom left-hand corner that are blown out too. So basically, you wouldn't want to really be gaming on this monitor. It would be very distracting. But one thing that laptops do have is that they've got an external HDMI port. As we can see right down the bottom of the laptop, there is an external HDMI here that will at the very least put out a 1080p signal to an external monitor at 60 Hertz. And so what I decided to do was I decided to add more budget on top of this already cheap laptop. And you're probably like, what's the specs of this thing? Well, it's actually got an i7 7700HQ. Now this CPU is actually surprisingly pretty good. From what I remember, it can boost up to around 3.4 gigahertz on 4 cores, 8 threads. And also there is a GTX 1050 4 gigabyte inside this laptop. And then we've got 8 gigabytes of DDR4 memory and a 120 gigabyte SSD, which we can upgrade the memory to 16 gigabytes if we want to, and we can also add in a secondary drive if we need more storage. So for the money, for $110 US, even though the screen is broken and it would be a very difficult process to fix, this base here, the core base of this laptop, is actually in pretty good condition, and it seems like it will be able to play games quite well. Though, let's get on to some of the other components that we're going to piece on to this laptop to make it a whole gaming PC setup. So first of all, the keyboard. We actually got this for free when we bought the laptop. I always ask people when they are selling stuff, do you have anything extra that you don't want? And if it's usually very cheap, in the case of this keyboard, they'll just give it away. And so we got a free keyboard, which we can then use with an external mouse. Now I picked up this mouse for $3 down at my local Officeworks. And then of course, the main component to fix this whole setup is a monitor, which in this case, we've got a Dell 1050p monitor. I picked this up with no stand for $10. And then I also decided to pick up a stand for it, a desk mount stand, for an additional $10. So in total, we've got here under $150 for a monitor stand, keyboard, mouse, and then a base system. Even though it's a laptop, I'm gonna call this thing a gaming PC. And the benefit of all this is that we didn't have to build any PC or anything like that in the process. So we actually saved quite a bit of time putting this setup together. But let's go over one critical thing to do in order to get this to work like a desktop gaming PC setup. So right here, we've got the laptop, we've got the screen open, and you'll notice that the screen's actually not showing any signal on it, and only the screen in the background, that's our external monitor, is showing a signal. And that's because on laptops, what we can do is move into the settings, and we can show only in Windows 10, show only the desktop on the external monitor. And that'll essentially turn this monitor here off, and that'll also allow us to close the lid on the laptop. But before we do this, before we close this lid, because I kind of don't want this screen hanging around and potentially busting itself even more, which could cause actual permanent damage to the laptop. And so if we want to close this lid and not turn off the external monitor, what we need to do is then go into Windows, Power Options, and it's got an option when we close the lid, what do we do? And essentially just change this to do nothing. And so that'll allow us to close this lid right here like this, and then essentially still have that external monitor to play games on. So the first benchmark we're going to pull up here is the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker benchmark. So this will give you just a simple score after it's done. I'm just using the out-of-the-box default settings, and we got here over 10,000 points. And so if you guys have a high-end PC or a low-end PC, mid-range PC, you guys can get your own score and actually compare it with mine, and then tally up what prices you paid for your PC. You can sort of get an idea of how much value you're getting versus this setup, which I do think this setup's going to definitely be on the higher end of terms of value for money. So 10,000 points seems like it's pretty good. It said that the score on the screen is pretty good, it's high. And the good thing about this benchmark as well, it's very quick to download, it's not that big, and you don't have to download the whole game in order to run it. Though let's move on now to the next benchmark that we've got here, and that is the Firestrike Extreme benchmark, where this will give you out a physics score, it'll also give you out a GPU score and a combined score, but I like to just look at them individually. And in the case of the physics score, it shows that the i7-7700HQ is actually not a bad CPU. It's getting close to 10,000 physics score, which is comparable to some of the, I'd say it's comparable to a 3rd gen desktop i7, which for a laptop CPU is actually going to be fine for playing games, especially with the GPU that it's coupled with. And then the GTX 1050, the 4GB version we got here, that scored 2,600 points on the GPU score. So on Firestrike Extreme, that's actually not that bad of a score. But of course, you guys probably want to know, how does it stack up in actual games? So let's move over now to the first title here, which is some really good news, and that is Splitgate, where we're getting over 140 average FPS. And also at the 1050p resolution that we're using with this monitor, we're getting a pretty good 1% and 0.1% lows, considering this only has one DDR4 stick of memory. If we coupled that with 2 sticks of memory, this would help alleviate the stuttering. Definitely not just giving it more system memory, but also putting it then in dual channel, which would be one of the key upgrades I would do if I had one of these sticks locally that I could find for a very good price. I did check around before making this video, and there really wasn't anything up for sale that I could just quickly get for a really good price and pop in. But that being said, the game still plays very smoothly. This is on medium settings, and it's still giving out a very good experience. Though what we're going to move over now to is Age of Empires 4, where in this title, we were getting around close to average of 50 average FPS, depending on what scene we're in. If we were heavy in the middle of a battle with lots of units on the screen, we'd drop down to the low 40s, but then of course we could even go up to as high as 60 FPS at 1050p full screen resolution with medium settings. And since Age of Empires 4 is quite a demanding title, this is actually good to see that this budget laptop can pull off a decent experience when it comes to playing this game. Though of course, what about the last title? Here is the ever popular Fortnite Chapter 3, which a lot of people ask me, especially when I go to sell things like this on the market. If it's a budget PC setup, I always get someone asking, what FPS can it do in Fortnite? This resolution of 1050p kind of sounds a little bit weird saying it when most people are used to 1080p, but at this resolution, we've got low settings, 100% screen resolution, and epic view distance. And we're getting, most of the times, the benchmark is showing it's around 90 average FPS. Now, the 0.1% lows does indicate that you will get a micro stutter every now and then, but at least in the duels that I was having with people, it was no problems whatsoever. I could still play this game perfectly fine. So after those performance figures, we could see that this laptop actually performed very well, and I would say it performed extremely well when we look at the price performance that we're getting. Now, of course, the only downside, as we said earlier, is this screen that's sort of hanging off here and it doesn't work properly. But of course, if you've got a lot of time and patience and you know what you're doing with laptops, you could probably fix this. But I've said in previous videos, I don't really focus on laptops. It's not my specialty. And I know for a fact that you can spend so much time with laptops and just end up at the same spot that you're in before you even attempted to do anything. But what we've got right here, $150 for this whole setup, and the performance that we're getting is just absolutely phenomenal. Now, the temperatures of this laptop, since it is a GTX 1050, it's not a power consuming GPU, but it's still pretty decent for giving out solid FPS. And so that was getting around 80 degrees. And then the CPU was boosting to about 3.5 to 3.4 gigahertz in games. And that was scoring, sometimes it would go up into the 90-degree region, but the whole laptop was still actually pretty quiet. So one thing that does worry me about laptops is they can get quite loud. So even though the temperatures were getting a little high, they were still tolerable, and also the noise was pretty good. So not a bad base laptop to begin with, but there's also one benefit that comes out of it. That is, we've also got speakers that if we put this underneath the monitor, we'll get left and right stereo speakers. So we don't have to go out and buy a headset or headphones, as we've already got speakers built into the laptop, which we can still use. And of course, if you want to save money, you can use the keyboard on the laptop itself as well. But I like to keep this lid and screen closed because I just feel like it's only going to do damage if I leave it open for too long. And I don't want this laptop getting any more damage than it is. And I know after this whole setup, it works perfectly the way it's set up right now. So when it comes to building a budget setup, if you guys have already looked around in the market and you've seen videos where there's people buying Dell pre-builts or HP or Lenovo pre-built older systems and then putting graphics cards in them, and that still comes up to be too expensive, then you may wish to start looking for a broken laptop, or at least a laptop with a broken screen, and seeing what you can pull off in terms of value for money. As in this case right here, we ended up coming up very good in terms of the value for the dollar. And actually before this video, is something that I had never really thought of, was buying broken laptops and using them in gaming PC setups. So that's definitely one thing that I personally just stumbled onto when I was doing the parts hunts. And of course, when I buy stuff in the parts hunts, I'm mainly looking, okay, what can I do with this stuff in terms of putting it into a gaming PC or building value out and then potentially making it a flip for profit. And in this case, I've already got someone coming over this Arvo, picking up this whole setup because they want something very cheap, and I'm still able to make a bit of profit in the process. So that's one of the beauties of looking around for a good deal. If it's a really good deal and you can make something work with it, then not only can you get a good experience for the time being, but you've also created yourself value, which you can then put towards an even better setup in the future. Though I know there's going to be some people in the comments like, why don't you try and fix this thing? And I just know that rabbit hole with laptops. I could buy a new monitor for it, a new frame, and it's probably going to end up costing me much more money than what I originally paid for the laptop. And even then, I've got to spend all that time, and I don't know if it's going to pay off, since locally here there are gaming laptops that are going for around $700. So if I then spend an extra $250 and then waste all that time, I'm actually probably going to come off in a worse position than I was with the amount of time that I spent putting together this gaming PC setup right here. So that's sort of how my brain works when it comes to putting together value. You've also got to factor in time, which a lot of people sometimes sort of forget about. Okay, how long is this actually going to take me to do? Would that time be better spent doing something elsewhere, building a setup elsewhere, or perhaps working somewhere else and making some extra money to do something else? Anyhow, guys, with that aside, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button. Also, let us know in the comment section below what you think of the budget setup on display here. Do you think it's a winner? Do you think it's a meta in terms of the budget gaming PC scene? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Hiryoda Taroka, and they ask, is that okay washing the motherboard for the cleaning with the water and dry the Mobo? Is it gonna damage the the motherboard of the material from the board. And so I get asked this a lot. When it comes to washing PC parts, I get asked this so much. And this is the only thing I can tell you guys is my experience. And no, it doesn't damage any of the parts. I've never damaged parts from washing them and then drying them off and then doing my process, and that's putting on multi-purpose spray, which then gets rid of any of the residual, the extra moisture, if there is any on there, and then it also protects the components. So in the process though, I have fixed so many parts, cleaning them up and getting them to work this way. So for me, the trade-off is just clearly in favor of washing PC parts if they're extremely dirty, or of course, just cleaning them up like I usually do without washing them. So you can go to different people and they can say different things, but in the end, my opinions that I give out, they're backed up by experiences and numbers. Even though I'm the only one who knows these numbers are right, I'm sure in time there'll be people out there that wash components and they do these methods that I'm doing and being like, yeah, if you know what you're doing and you do it properly, you're going to get a really good success rate. And so that's my experience with it. And the fact that I keep on doing it and sort of some of the naysayers that don't do it, never really try it, should tell you something. So I hope that answers that question. And if you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, then make sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell. And also if you want some behind the scenes access where we're sort of talking about just things related to PC tech, some of the hints that I'm doing, some of the things I'm doing personally behind the scenes here, then for as little as $1 a month, you can become a member, hit that join button, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.
Bing.